Hello and Namaste. My name is Ajay Kashyap and I welcome all of you to the first ever Instagram dialogue and InstaLog with the President of Indian Council for Cultural Relations, Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe. Welcome, sir.
Namaste.
We welcome you to this unique discussion on culture and democracy, as Vinay sir rightly puts it across. As young people of this incredible civilization, we often read about our past and our heritage, but some questions about our identity go unanswered. And it is precisely for this reason that we have Dr. Sahasrabuddhe with us to address these questions for young India. Sir, my first question to you is, what is this uniqueness of Bharatiya or Indian identity?
See, basically we must understand that we have a civilizational culture. So unlike many other countries, I need not name them, who are just few centuries old, our country, our culture and our society has a history of several centuries, maybe millennia. And therefore, we just cannot compare ourselves. I mean, as it is a fact, I mean, there is no question of any jingoism kind of, but the fact remains that we are a pretty old civilizational culture, and that we have to bear in mind. And therefore, when we say, I am an Indian, the entire history comes with you. You cannot separate that history from what you are. Once you say that you are an Indian, doesn't matter whether you are a non-resident Indian or people of Indian origin or whatever it is. Once you say that I am an Indian, I belong to India, I am from Bharat, then all these things automatically come with you. I mean, they are an inseparable part of your identity. And insofar as key characteristics of Indian culture are concerned, because they have become a part of our identity. See, every Indian, by birth, in a way, I would say, by nature, very understandably, is pretty democratic. You will not find an Indian with an undemocratic mind, generally speaking. I mean, there are exceptions, no doubt, but generally speaking, why? Because we are essentially a spiritual democracy. We were never taught that go and worship only this God and don't look at the other God or keep abusing other gods. So why this? Because we are democratic. So this spiritual democracy is one of the unique features of our culture and therefore our identity. Unity in diversity, again, something very unique. We always say ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. So we appreciate all kinds of, not just appreciate, not just accept, but we recognize, we celebrate diversity. Something very important. Today there are countries who do not know how to celebrate diversity. So they are struggling with what they call as multiculturalism. We don't require that. Then our approach towards Mother Nature, where we have always been very grateful to Mother Nature. No question of any confrontation with nature. We are always for confluence with Mother Nature. Is that not so?
Absolutely.
So that again is a very important distinctive feature of our identity. So all these things put together, I believe, we get our identity. And therefore, there is something remarkably unique about Indian identity.
So you spoke about how our identity goes back to perhaps more than a millennia. So has this identity changed over a period of time? And if yes, what has prompted this change?
See, that way identity, culture and all these things, in India in Sanskrit especially, we keep on saying Nitya Nutan Chira Puratan. So ever aging, never old. But aging, yes, of course, Nitya Nutan, so every time there is something new. But Chira Puratan, so the Puratanata and the newness, the Navata, goes hand in hand because we are a living culture. We are a living civilization. We were never moribund, and there were no steel frames that would perhaps inhibit us. Nothing. And therefore, yes, there were changes. But if I may reflect only on changes, I would not hesitate in saying that assaults on our civilizational culture, especially by the invaders, and for centuries together, certainly there were some elements of impurity that must have affected our culture. I mean, because when you remain with certain people who are characteristically not very broad-minded, not very inclusive, not very accommodative, you also try to copy them because they are the victors. They were the victors. You know what I am saying?
Absolutely.
So all these things definitely have, in a way, polluted our identity and our culture as well. Yet, the core of it continues as what it was.
So you spoke as to how our identity is ever aging but never old. So in this 21st century jet-setting age, how does the identity matter to young India?
Well, it's an important thing for all of us to understand. Many of us keep traveling abroad, and people who might have visited Beijing, they would agree with me, because when I was there a few years before, when I had a chance of visiting Beijing, I could not help myself but feel that perhaps I am in a Mandarin America. Same experience I had when I visited Israel.
Right.
Beautiful country. But I kept reminded by the atmosphere over there that perhaps I am in a Hebrew America. And let's understand well that you don't get that experience either in Hutatma Chowk or Flora Fountain in Mumbai, or maybe in Rajiv Chowk or Connaught Circus in Delhi. Why? Because we have continued with our, and that has given us the unique characteristic. I'm sure many of the younger generation must have heard about Thomas Friedman and his famous book, The World is Flat. Of course, he is talking about level playing field in the changing globalized economy. There is everybody who can compete. I mean, who is capable of competing with others, he can compete because there is a level playing field. In that sense, he was welcoming the flattening of the world. But in the cultural context, I would say that the global community will be doing a disservice if it apes a particular pattern of lifestyle, whether it is Western, whether it is American, or whichever it is. Because you grow with your geographical, climatic conditions that give you a particular way of life, particular lifestyle that provides you some identity, and you have to retain that. You know, doctors say, I mean, we keep on saying this, that apple a day keeps the doctor away. But a famous agriculture scientist in Maharashtra told me that this is a misnomer. Apple a day keeps the doctor away is okay in India, for example, in Himachal Pradesh, where apples are grown.
Yeah.
But if you eat apple every day, let's say in Mumbai, it will make you visit the doctor perhaps every day. So, these are the facts of life.
Right. So, how do we impress upon the virtues of the Bharatiya culture upon the young people of India?
First of all, the young people of India need to appreciate that we cannot ape the Western cultures, the Western lifestyle, and certainly there is no always an element of modernity when you are copying what is the Western. Westernization is not synonymous to modernization, certainly not. And therefore, modern, yes, of course, we have to. We have to keep changing. That is also okay. There are a number of fashions coming from abroad, and nobody need to be against them. What is to wear and what kind of clothes to use is everybody's liberty. I mean, I am not commenting on that. But this should not come at the cost of some kind of a ridicule of whatever is Indian. Because it is not for no reason that this particular civilizational culture had survived. You know, that famous poet says in that song which all of us have heard several times, which is, "Kya baat hai ki hasti mitati nahi hamari." So this is a question for everybody of us. And that hasti is the kind of lifestyle that we have adopted, the kind of world view that we have adopted, the kind of approaches towards, let's say, Mother Nature that we have adopted. And therefore, we have to take pride in being Indian. Identity, once upon a time, was considered as a very primordial thing. But even today, social scientists have realized that it is not so. In a way, it is a force that helps you sustain the human life. And therefore, identity is extremely critical, extremely important. I'm sure everybody knows what Shakespeare said. Shakespeare said famously, "What is a name?" But we realize in our day-to-day approach that day-to-day life that everything is in name. If I write my name as Vijay instead of Vinay, the difference is that of one letter. Yeah. Instead of N, they use J. What is in name? But no, if my name is Vijay on my, let's say, Aadhaar card, will anyone recognize me as Vinay? Nobody. I cannot explain them, "Arey boss, Shakespeare has said that what is in name," that cannot be the answer. Right. So everything is in name. Likewise, everything is in identity. Only thing is that we should not, and this is, I believe, something very important for all of us to understand, that our smaller identities need not overshadow our larger identity. Right. Therefore, if I am a Marathi, or you are a Gujarati, or a Kannadiga, or whosoever, that is not our fundamental identity. Our fundamental identity is that of our country. We are Indians first. So that, and this is applicable to your social groups, your language groups, your regional identities, everything. I mean, smaller identities are there. You cannot crush them. You cannot do them away. But you have to ensure that they are ultimately permeated into the larger identity. That is the key.
Absolutely, sir. So it's pertinent that you mention the distinction between Western and modern, and the need to not ridicule what is your own and your culture and your past. In this context, sir, do you think that identity will matter to young India in the days and years to come?
Yes, of course. I mean, there is a process of globalization. Everybody wants to speak fluent English, which is all understandable. You cannot prevent the forces of globalization, that is for sure. But at the same time, you should not willfully giving away your identity, your core, because that helps you live your life with a certain amount of emotional health. And that is very required. I mean, simply physically you are healthy is not enough. Emotionally and psychologically also, you have to have that sense of being rooted, being connected, being related to the soil, to the society which has given you the identity of yours. And therefore, this rootedness is something very, very critical. And therefore, identities will continue to matter. No doubt. Today, what is happening in France? What is happening in several other European countries? I mean, it's all about identity. So, I don't think we can wish away that the world will become we can wish away the importance of identity and simply remain in an illusionary world saying that doing away with identities will perhaps make this world more beautiful. That perhaps will be very, what I should say, self-deceiving in a way.
So you spoke about the importance of being rooted to the soil. So this brings me to the next question as to how does the world see us as Bharatiya or Indian?
This is something very important, because what has happened is, for a number of reasons, including social, political, and so on and so forth, but unfortunately, to the global community, we have not been able to present ourselves as Indians first and Indians last. Many times people used to compare India with a Kirana shop. If you go to a Kirana shop, it has been boldly written over there that this is a Kirana store. And if you ask them, give me, let's say, 2 kilo of Kirana, the person at the counter will get fumbled, because there is nothing like Kirana in a Kirana shop. Unfortunately, we have reduced our country to that stage where you will find a Bengali, a Marathi, an Assamese, or let's say a Rajput, a Vaishya, a Brahmin, but you will not find an Indian, sadly. So, to the global community at least, not just to the global community, but at least to the global community, it is our duty to present ourselves as Indian. And in that context, our identity requires to be very holistic. We should not be denigrating any other section of our society, any other region, any other linguistic group for that matter. Respect for everybody, that is what we have been taught. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. So all these lofty ideals, it is our duty to ensure that they are also reflected through our behavior, through our conduct, our individual conduct, our social conduct as well. Only then the global community will be able to understand what India is about and how important it is for Indians to be Indians.
Right, sir. Sir, earlier in the interview, you mentioned about the invasions that India had to see, the unfortunate invasions. In that context, sir, can you name some characters in our history or some instances which have ensured that we retain our Bharatiya identity despite the challenges that we face?
Number of them. For example, let's take the example of Basavanna from Karnataka. I mean, we have been talking about spiritual democracy, but he perhaps was one of the early leaders who translated that spiritual democracy into a practical political democracy. We know how great practitioner and a very committed one he was about democratic values, democratic principles. Let's take the example of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. He has also insisted on Swabhasha and Swabhusha. He was one of the earlier reformers of Marathi language, which had got adulterated with so many Parsi terms and words and whatnot. Take the example of Lachit Barphukan. I mean, the way he resisted the onslaught of the invaders for not just 1 or 2, but 17 long years, right, through 17 battles. I mean, all these are icons who spent their entire life for the protection of our identity. And it will be a disservice to them, it will be an insult to them if we forego our identity under the lure of some kind of modernism, which is in fact a kind of westernization.
Right, sir. So this brings me to my next question, which is, what other cultures that you see around the world come close to the Bharatiya culture?
Well, I would say the typical Bharatiya approach is that most cultures and Indian culture have several things in common. So that is how we have been ingrained. We have always been taught that there is some good aspect in every other culture. So I would not pinpoint that in this culture there is some goodness, there is something which is worth emulating. It is practically everywhere, I would say. I mean, let's talk of the Buddhist culture, the Buddhism. I mean, it has originated from India, after all. So naturally, that Indianness is very much over there. And there are certain good practices, I believe, in every other culture. Let's talk of the Maya culture in Mexico, or several other cultures for that matter. So we have always believed that there are elements which we need to in a way emulate, in a way try to inculcate in our own lifestyle, the way we look at the culture.
Right, sir. And talking about culture, how is our culture and our way of life a soft power for India?
As I said, India is India because of its culture. Take away culture, and what remains of India? Take away our Bharatanatyam, our Kathak, our Mohiniyattam, our Satriya dance of Assam, or the Lavani of Maharashtra, and what remains of India? Take away all the music traditions, the Jaipur Gharana, the Kirana Gharana, so on and so forth. Take away the Robindra Sangeet, the Jyoti Sangeet of Assam, the bamboo dance of Mizoram, and what remains of India? So all these things, let's talk of our culinary and cuisine traditions. Give me an example of any Indian restaurant which is not making a brisk business abroad. Everybody. Why? Because our culinary and cuisine traditions have been able to attract the global community all over the world. So likewise, all these are the various dimensions of our soft power. And we need to recognize them, we need to respect them, we need to build further on them. And then only we can talk about India's soft power. See, soft power is not just about goodwill.
Right.
We enjoy a huge amount of goodwill practically in all parts of the globe. But the challenge is how do we translate that goodwill into a proper and deeper understanding of India.
Right.
And that unfortunately still is, continues to be a task unfinished.
Right, sir. So we've tried to understand the importance of our culture and our identity. To all the young people who are watching this InstaLog, could you recommend some books that they can perhaps go back and read, sir, on our culture and our identity?
Yeah, number of books, but one book which I would very strongly recommend comes from Mr. Michel Danino, and he is a French person, a disciple of Yogi Aurobindo and Ma especially, and currently he is in Ahmedabad teaching management science at the IIM Ahmedabad, as I understand. And this book particular, which is named as Indian Culture and India's Future. So Indian culture is in a way all the previous generations for that matter, and India's future is the next generation. So for Gen Next India, this is something very, very important to understand. And I am tempted to read out a couple of paragraphs which very succinctly bring about as to why we need to respect our culture.
Right, sir.
If I may read?
Absolutely, sir, please.
So the paragraph says, on page 22 to be precise, if therefore we want to revitalize India, we must tap the real source of life and strength in ourselves to start with. Keep the essence of this country's long journey through time, keep the core of its experience, give it as many new forms, as many new expressions as we wish. So we are not against anything new, Nitya Nutan, Chirapuratan. So we welcome everything that is good and that comes to us from various directions, various parts of the globe. Danino further says, to aspire to bring back the bygone past, glorious or not, would be foolish and fruitless. Our past, and now he is quoting Yogi Aurobindo, our past with all its faults and defects should be sacred to us. Remember, but that is only the first part of this statement. The second part says, but the claims of our future with its immediate possibilities should be more sacred. This is something critical. He further says, then if we find some aspects of Indian culture outdated, let us first understand them, then get rid of them. Chop off the dead wood. If we want a prosperous country, let us tackle in earnest the cancer of corruption. Remove the weeds of creepers. If we want to imitate the West, let us imitate its self-discipline. Something very important, as I said, there is good part in every other culture, including the Western culture. We need not lock, stock and barrel reject everything simply because it is coming from the West. So, let us not embrace everything simply because it is Western, and let us not reject everything simply because it is Western. He further says, its constant search for innovation, not its greed and tragic lack of direction, do not fell the tree. Preserve it, water it, nourish it, care for it. It is life-giving tree, and perhaps its richest fruit is yet to come. See how important is this. And lastly, he is quoting Vivekananda saying, Out of this decay is coming the India of the future, said Swami Vivekananda. It is sprouting. Its first leaves are already out, and a mighty, gigantic tree is here, already beginning to appear. I believe there cannot be any more powerful message for the younger generation, the Gen Next, with whom I am trying to have this dialogue.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I think after having read and heard you from Michael Denino's book, I think I could say this, that he might be European by birth,
Correct.
but he's certainly Bharatiya by culture.
Of course, beyond doubt.
That is the beauty of our culture.
Right.
We're so accepting. And you mentioned how he spoke we could learn self-discipline from others. And I think that is also enshrined in our values.
Yeah, of course.
Ano Bhadra Karto Yantu Vishwata, that let knowledge come from all directions. I think, sir, with this, we are at the end of our interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For this. And I'm sure that all young people watching this will have a tremendous time going back and reading the books that you've suggested. Thank you so much, sir. With this, we come to the end of our first ever InstaLog with Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe. We'll be back in 15 days' time with another topic to discuss on culture and democracy. See you in a couple of weeks. This is Ajay Kashyap signing off. Thank you.